Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Atomy Brainwaves, our podcast on education for educators. Brainwaves is produced by our wonderful team here at Atomy. What is Atomy? It's an online teaching and learning platform for secondary education. We provide engaging, curriculum-specific video and text lessons for over 190 subjects, as well as matching quizzes and exam practice that can be used for both learning and formative assessment. We also provide powerful analytics that can help teachers diagnose how their students are progressing and zero in on who might need a little bit of extra help. Our goal is to help make life easier for our teachers, give them more time to work on the most important things, and ultimately help to generate better outcomes. If you want to find out more about Atomy, head over to our main site at getatomy.com and feel free to try it out for free. This week, I got to speak to Simon Hunt, specialist leader in primary education, social media presence, and creator of MrHuntFromTheFront.com. We discussed the innovative methods he employs in his classroom, how he translates these methods into CPD training for teachers, and the positives that might be achieved from the changes brought about in schools as a result of coronavirus. If this sounds like your kind of thing, make sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts, and we'll never say no to a quick 5-star review. For now, give this episode a listen, and I hope you enjoy.
Are you going to teach us anything?
What, you want me to teach you something? You want to learn something? All right. You got it!
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Atomy Brainwaves. I'm your host Simon, and today I am joined by our very special guest, Simon Hunt, primary school teacher, specialist leader in education, keynote speaker, social media presence, and creator of MrHuntFromTheFront.com. Welcome, Mr. Hunt.
And thank you, Simon, for having me, and it's nice to meet another Simon. We are a dying breed. Apparently it's one of the least, I don't know, in the UK, baby names of Simon are disappearing, so we've got to keep that name going, Simon. Keep it
You
going.
are absolutely right. I was about to say the same thing. It's one of those, I often say it's one of those unfortunate names which people think of as a common name, but is actually not that common at all. So
No.
It's seen as boring, but it's at the same time rare. But
We're
so
a
it's
rarity.
Yeah, we certainly are. Good to have that little bit of solidarity there with another Simon. And so I guess from one Simon to another, I'm gonna ask you lots of stuff today around our central topic, which is innovation in primary education, a real area of expertise for yourself and something which you've got a lot of background and an exciting experience in. But as our regular listeners will know, we always like to start with our guests by just getting a run through of your journey in education to date. You know, how did you start out as a teacher, and what were the twists and turns along the road that led you along the path, away in some ways from the conventional path to some of the more kind of impressive innovations that you have undertaken?
Okay, well,
So-
I was quite late into teaching, so I didn't start teaching until I was 30. So my route into teaching, I'm going to go back to when I was in year 6, a 10-year-old boy. So I've always been really, really quiet, kind of beige in school, well behaved, academically fine, but kind of can go under the radar. When I was in year 6, a teacher called Mrs. Parker, she was the first teacher to take an interest in me. And she could see that I liked art because she was an artist herself, and she really believed in me. And I came out of my shell in that one year. I went to secondary school, kind of went back again, kind of didn't cope well in secondary school, very quiet. And then I didn't go to university till I was 21. I did my 3 years in university, and then I had some time out while I tried to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And then I always loved working with children. We've got a big family. I always loved working with kids. So I decided that I wanted to be someone's Mrs. Parker, technically. Because remember, because you always have that teacher you remember that you loved, that teacher that really had a bad impact upon your life. So I thought, I want to be someone's Mrs. Parker. So I did some work experience in school. I did a day a week, and eventually I did my teaching degree in London, because I wanted to, with being quite a shy person myself, I wanted to get away from Ramsbottom, where I live now, in the Chadderton area. So I went to London to do my PGCE. I did my PGCE down there, completely different to where I live now. I qualified just before I turned 30, and I moved back up to the Manchester area. And then from there, I started teaching reception, so that's the children that are 4 and 5 year olds. Taught there for a year or two. Then I taught in year 6, so year 10 and 11, so the children that I like that child that I was when I was in year 6. And then I've been in Tottington Primary now for the past. I call it seasons, so I'm on my 4th season in Tottington Primary School. So yeah, I was quite late into teaching, and fortunately, when I do my CPD sessions and I talk to people, I always say I want to be someone's Mrs. Parker. I was on BBC Radio. I think it's about September, and I was talking about Mrs. Parker, saying that I wanted to be someone's Mrs. Parker one day, and she heard it on the radio, and she rang in, and I got to speak to her, and it was so strange that she remembered little details about the thing. She remembered a picture that I painted, and she remembered all these little details. And I think it must be so nice. And that's my job, I feel now, that when children get older, that they'll think, I want to be like Mr. Hunt, or he had a positive impact on my life. And that's kind of how I want to be someone's Mrs. Parker, and that's my goal in life, I think. So that's kind of my route into teaching. And then the CPD side and the teacher training side, that came later. I kind of fell into that. It originally started with my Facebook page. I started posting ideas on my Facebook page. And then it just kind of grew from there. So I was having people contacting me saying, the stuff you do on your Facebook page, could you maybe come and talk about it in our schools? And that's kind of how I fell into the CPD side of it. I hope that explains answers your question.
No, it certainly does. And I would it be fair to say, just listening to those two things, first of all, your inspiration for getting involved in teaching in the first place, this Mrs. Parker sounds wonderful, and then the CPD element and how that started. I mean, would it be fair to say that there might be some sort of a connection there, in that, having been inspired by a teacher who went that little bit of a step further, who was kind of there for her students in a way that, helped them actualize the best aspects of themselves? Could that have kind of played into why you yourself felt the need to go that little, because it is going a little bit of a step further, even with something like a Facebook page, to it's not a bad thing, but I'd say there are plenty of teachers who would sort of, in their mind, they leave it at the door of the school. When they come in the morning, that's when they're on, and then when they leave, that's when they're off. But for you to take that step further, could it almost be bringing what Mrs. Parker brought to you to the online world? Perhaps I'm reaching a little here.
No. I completely understand what you're saying, because the reason why I started my Facebook page, because I had a lesson that went really, really well, and I thought, gosh, someone else could use this in their classroom. How can I let people know about this? So I recorded a little bit to camera. I'd have some things from my classroom, and I'd share it, and then it would ping around, and people would share it. And I think that it's so powerful for me. I get messages sometimes, and I get videos of a class. I had a video of a class in Spain doing a poetry lesson that I taught in my class a few years ago, that they saw one of my videos. So, because my aim is to get the best out of kids, and by sharing things that go well for me in class, and sometimes the things that don't go so well online, and then maybe thinking that a teacher somewhere might see that, use some of that ideas, maybe change it for their classroom, and it impacts positively on a child that they teach. For me, that's why I do it, and that's why I will always share things online about things, because I just want to help other kids, and kids are kids anywhere around the world. I mean, I had a Zoom session last week, because I've written a book, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, with 150 children in Kathmandu via Zoom. And they were asking the similar questions about being an author, writing process, that my kids in Ramsbottom, which is just outside Manchester, I'm pointing, like, I know everyone can't see me, but I'm pointing in the direction of my school. But they have similar questions, so children just have that inquisitive nature, and I think something that works in my class can work in another class around the world, and it's just a nice thing to see and to think that might happen.
Absolutely, and I'm very much looking forward to getting into some of these techniques and models and practices that you've written about or posted about. But before we get there, just want to kind of, for the purposes of context, kind of talk a little bit about, I guess, the traditional or usual classroom structure of a primary school, the kind of the classroom model that most listeners will be familiar with, either from their own school days or perhaps even currently as teachers. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, not to bash it, but just an examination of sort of some of the limitations that traditional, teacher at the front, rows of desks, just some of the limitations within that model, and consequently, tied into that, the importance in the modern world of innovation. Before we get into the actual innovations themselves, why innovation is important in these primary school classrooms.
Right. So this is a rabbit hole I've been going down for the past year. So and it all started when I went to see The Lion King. So I went to see
many great undertakings do.
So I went to see Lion King in the Lyceum Theatre in London, and when we got I went with my wife, we got our tickets, and we got the tickets at the back of the theatre. And the reason why we got the tickets at the back of the theatre, well, why would you, on a teacher's wage, why do you think I went for the seats at the back of the theatre? It's because of the price. So they were cheaper. So I think we paid something like £60, £70 for stuff right at the top. And then when I looked at the seating arrangements at the front, there were seats there for £200, £300, some of them. And I got thinking, so why? The reason why is because if you sat at the front, you get a better view. And you get a better sound. You get the better sound, so you just get a better overall experience. So when I went back into my classroom, I looked at how the layout of my classroom, which is a square classroom. The tables are in rows or little groups with the screen at the front, and children just placed around. And I tended to stand near the front of the classroom. So I thought, well, in a way, I've got children in my classroom that are sat in cheap seats, I call it. So the children at the back corner, they have a slightly restricted view to those sat at the front. So technically, I've got kids in those £200-300 seats in my classroom, but I've also got kids in those £50 seats that I paid for in the classroom. And so I looked into the history of the layout of the classroom. It's pretty much stayed the same. So we tended to, going back hundreds of years, and see now recently, children are sat in rows or in groups facing forward with the screen at the front and the teacher stood at the front. And from there, I looked at So I came to these 2 points. The classroom design really hasn't changed for 200 years-ish, and the teacher really hasn't moved, but the technology has changed. So when we went from chalkboard to overhead projectors to interactive whiteboards now, so the technology's changed, but the layout really hasn't changed that much. So I looked at the research, and so this research by Salford University, they talk about the layout of a classroom can have a direct impact on the children that you teach. And I also looked, so there was a study by Epson in 2019, they call it the cheap seats, which is where I got this idea from. And then, so I thought, well, is there anything out there that looks at this and how to combat this? And there was actually a study at St. Peter's Girls' School in Adelaide in Australia. So what they did is they had 2 screens installed into a classroom. So they had one on one wall and one on the other. And the layout of the classroom was based on the viewing angle of those children. So because of the viewing angle, they all had a better view of the screen. And then when I looked into the detail, the layout, the other thing that I thought about is when I was at the theatre, is we didn't hear as well as those at the back. So I did think that, is this something does that happen in the classroom as well? Do those children at the back of the classroom, can they always hear what the teacher says? And so I looked into the research at this, and I think it's problems with voice. With vocal cords, I think after opera singers, the number one profession that has problem with vocal cords after opera singers is teachers, because we use our teacher voice. So do you know when lots of teachers are proud of their teacher voice? Well, you don't shout, you just talk really, really loud and you project your voice. Yes. And it has I think it's something like 1 million vocal clashes in your vocal cords, way more than any other profession apart from opera singers. So it has a strain on your voice. So you'll see teachers in September, those teaching, in England we start in September, so those teachers, the first few weeks, your voice is strained, you have a few people sounding like Darth Vader knocking around the school, because we don't talk as much over the summer period. And so I thought, well, is it, the way they combated this in the theatre is they had microphones. So I thought, is this something similar to that in the school environment? And I did find something called a front row Juno. So what they did is you place a microphone, so it's kind of like it's an infrared microphone, and when you speak in your normal voice, they've got a Bluetooth speaker, and it just projects your voice around the classroom. And it's really, really strange, because as a teacher, for 10 years I've been teaching, I've been used to talking loud with my teacher voice, and then I was able to just talk in my normal voice. And because I'm talking in a normal talking voice, the volume of the classroom sort of lowered as well, and they could all hear wherever I stood. So wherever I stood in the classroom, if I was at the back, as out at the left, as out at the front, they could all hear perfectly well. And on the flip side, we had like a pass-around microphone as well. So when children share work in the classroom, someone will share work and they'll pop their hand up and they'll talk about what they've done. At the other end of the classroom, the kids have no idea what these children over this end of the classroom are saying because they just can't hear them. But with a microphone and by projecting the sound around the classroom, I was able to do that. And I also got another screen put into my classroom. So I have now 2 screens. I've got one screen on this side and one screen on the other side. And if you look at my Facebook page, you can see my classroom. It looks like 2 different classrooms, but it's not. It's the same classroom. And what that enables my children to do is they can all see clearly, they can hear. And because of technology, because of wireless technology, like a mirror in your Apple device, I can walk around the classroom. And then as I'm teaching, I can look at what the children are doing. If they're struggling with something as I'm teaching, I can just jump in and just help them out straight there. Or it just frees you up. So that's why I call it Unchained Teacher. So I'm able to walk around freely and then I can just jump in whenever needed. And also, after the lockdown, I put on a bit of lockdown timber, so it does increase your step rate as well, so you can get a bit of walking around the classroom.
Okay.
It's a fitness thing as well. But yeah,
killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I like it.
Exactly. So that's kind of I mean that's all about the classroom layout. And I know people will be thinking, gosh, I can't afford to have another screen. But what you'll have schools around the country, around the world they might have had a new board in. And then they took the old projector down and put them in a cupboard. So what we've done in our school is, because it worked so well in my classroom, that old projector, when we had new screens put in, we kept that there and we just turned it round to the other wall. And then then we have 2 screens. So we didn't buy something new. We kept our old projector, the old technology that we already have, and we took some out of the cupboards and we were able to mirror. So I have 2 screens showing the exact same thing in the classroom. And we replicated that throughout the school. We even had a parent donated an old TV that they had, which by just putting a HDMI cable, popped it on the wall, we had an extra screen in the classroom. And it's just really opened up the teacher to be able to move around the classroom and also for the children to be able to see. Gosh, I've just kind of gone on there way too long there, but does that explain?
Not at all. I mean, it really does, and it's a great insight because it sort of raises things that wouldn't even immediately spring to mind as issues such as what you're talking about, teacher voice. I mean, I had no idea that was that teachers came second to opera singers for vocal cord difficulty. But one thing that's shining through as well there, because as you say, and it is a point that has to be made, that oftentimes you'll hear people trumpeting the values of these great innovations or new resources, and we'll get to resources again later. And there it is a viable and relevant response to say, well, not every school can afford this, not every classroom can afford this.
Completely.
But what your story there has really shown is that you can get creative with it. You can figure out, okay, maybe it's not going to be every bit as stylish or glamorous as the £1,000, €1,000 solution, but you can get effectively the same outcome by being a little bit savvy and working with what you have, by the sounds of things.
Definitely. So work with the technology that you have, but also be a bit cheeky. So that extra £2,000 board that we had, we got that donated, and the way we got that donated is I contacted companies and said, by the way, have you got any old stock that you don't need, because we're a really needy school, we'd love to have this technology. And it's quite surprising that a lot of the stuff we've got in our school, it's because, do you know when you were a child you say, I used to be told by mum, if you ask you don't get. That's not true with these. Ask companies, and if they say no, you're in the same position. If they say yes, bingo, you've got a brand new bit of technology. And we've done that with lots of different things. We've done that with old laptops. We've done that with we've kind of, it's because people don't realise that this stuff is out there. And also competitions. I enter competitions all the time. So we entered a competition for BT where you send in a video of what technology you would like in school. We won £10,000 for the school. And the reason why we won is, one, because we had a good video entry and the children helped create that video. And two, not that many people enter these competitions because they think that everyone does. So it's kind of, because the year after I judged the competition, because I worked with BT after that, and we had Promethean gave out 10 of those big panel screens, and they had 30 entries. So you had a 1 in 3 chance of winning £1,000 screen just by entering a competition. So I would enter every competition you can. And you'd be quite surprised what you might get.
Yeah, exactly. It was how we might say it over here is you can't win the lottery without buying a ticket.
Exactly.
That's a phrase that that I think applies a little bit to. Sometimes you don't even have to buy the ticket by the sound of things. You just need to get your hands on one somehow. Exactly. Yeah. Talk yourself into a lottery ticket. Well, plenty of very valuable routes to take there with regards to being clever, being savvy, and in the spirit of this innovation, we're gonna move along to something that is obviously a very big part, as you can tell from your story there, started out through maybe the social media page, become a very big part of your work, is kind of your CPD training models and the innovations you kind of help teachers bring into the classroom through your training, be that in person or online, and through your writing. And obviously I know you could talk for days and days, and oftentimes I'm sure do, in outlining all of these models. We're unfortunately, due to the limitations of the podcast, going to have to get more of a bird's eye view, but I just was hoping that you could run us through some of, maybe your most successful or some of the most applicable CPD training models for teachers, the reasoning behind them, how you put them into action, and what the successful outcomes that they can bring about when done correctly in the classroom.
Okay, so sometimes the most simple things are the most effective. So things that I think my value is someone that delivers CPDs. I work 4 days a week in a classroom. So all the things that I talk about in my CPD sessions, I know work because I've used them within the past few months, and I can show video content. I'm able to do that with my school. Of it working in my classroom, and because I've seen some CPD before where I've seen a speaker who's got a fantastic way of speaking, some really good ideas, but you just know that they've not been in a classroom for 4 or 5 years, and I think me kind of testing it on the children is the best. I mean, they're the best people to test it on. So I think that's my value with the CPD that I do. But I'd say the most successful things are, like I said, the most simple things, which was I've used Skype in the classroom and online, like we're doing now, having a conversation online for years, and talked about it and how simple it is. So from our classroom, in the classrooms that I've worked with, we've spoken to authors on the other side of the world, and every laptop pretty much has a webcam and a microphone, so it's really simple to use. So I've spoken to authors on the other side of the world. Matt Martin, an author in Australia, we've spoken to him. We've spoken to people that have been on the film Blackfish in America, in Alaska. We've spoken, like I said before, I've spoken to people over in Kathmandu, some children. So I show how easy it is to do this and how powerful it is just by jumping on Skype and asking people. Again, be a bit cheeky with it. So when we look at authors, what I do is, and this is a good bit of advice, and it doesn't matter which author it is, because you never know, it might happen. I find them on Twitter or Facebook, and if we're doing their book, I'll send them a message and say, hey, by the way, I love your book. My kids are amazed. They absolutely love your book. Is there any chance we could, have an interview or speak to you? And it's really surprising how many authors say yes, because if you're a children's author, you're writing for children. And imagine, and I've spoken to authors about this previous, and I use this in my CPD. I have authors explaining the flip side for them. Peter J. Black is one who explains that he sat in his office, because he can't always get to all these schools around the country. He sat in his office talking to children about writing and his love for writing, and it's so powerful to have that conversation with them and to inspire them, because as teachers we say to kids, you can be an author, you can be this, you can be that, but if they actually get to speak to these people, they believe it more, and they also humanize these people, so they put them up on pedestals. So before we spoke to Peter J. Black, when he spoke to us, we found out things that we didn't find out using Google. He explained that he failed his GCSE English, and that he struggled with writing, and then these things that he didn't put in the book that he might put in his next book, and we found out all this bit of information just by talking to him. And then at the end he would say, I think you could be an author one day. And then they start to believe it even more. And it's not just authors. We've spoken to people that worked on Minecraft, we've spoken to people that worked in Microsoft, we've spoken to scientists, we've spoken to all different types of people. And as a teacher, you're having this you're having this learning just taking place. We did one in when I first got to Tottington. Our first topic was the North Pole, the North Pole, and I found through Skype in Education, which is a great resource, a great website, that there's a scientist group in the North Pole that will speak to you via Skype. So a few days later, we were sat in the classroom having a direct conversation with a scientist in the North Pole who was looking at the ice. One of the kids said, "What's the weather like out there, sir?" And he turned around and he just showed them. He said, "Look, it's snowing. This is what we're doing now." And it was so powerful, and that was free, and it doesn't cost a penny, and you can just do that from the comfort of your classroom. Because budgets are quite tight at the moment, and it's really expensive to get to the North Pole. It costs a lot of money, but you can do it in your classroom for free. You can do it for free.
Hey folks, hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we've got plenty more to come after this quick break. Here at Atomy Brainwaves, we're all about education, and not just for students, for ourselves too. We would love to hear from you, whether that's feedback on one of our episodes or a question you'd like to see answered by one of our guests or by Sue. So, if you've got a comment or a question, don't hesitate to email us at brainwaves@getatomy.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, let's get back to it. Yeah, amazing. It's again, I have to say again, it's something that would have been something that never even occurred to me as an avenue to pursue. But it does make so much sense, and maybe there can be a cynical view that people can have of a famous author or a successful whoever it is scientist won't have time, and unfortunately, if it's the case that they need to come out to your school, even an author, let's say, with the best of intentions, might simply not be feasible. But what you're talking about, this using Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, just to bring them right into the classroom, well, of course that's going to be so much more, because then from their end, the ease of just being able to log onto their computer, and of course then the reason they're doing it, which is if you're a children's author, being able to deliver something like that to children and see it face to face, I imagine they get just as much out of it as the kids do.
It must be so powerful, and also on the other side of it as well is they know that you bought the book anyway. You would have bought the book, and some children might then go out and buy some more books by the author. So it makes sense both ways. But it's so powerful. And being on the flip side of it recently as last week, Skyping with Kathmandu, it's amazing to see that a book that I've written in this office that I'm sat in now about my daughter is being read by some children over in Kathmandu. It's surreal, but it's an amazing thing to think can happen, and that's because of technology. That's the positive side of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. For the students in your classroom, they're going to be 110% on board when something exciting like this happens. When it comes to, I guess, training teachers or introducing something like this to teachers, how do you find that process? Because, I imagine oftentimes, in the vast majority of cases, there's going to be teachers who are enthusiastically jump right on board with this, but do you ever find a certain amount of pushback maybe from, I don't want to stereotype or paint with broad strokes, but maybe the older guard who aren't as used to technology in their classroom and have been doing things a certain way for a long time, if you encounter this?
Yeah.
Or do you find once they see the benefits of what you can bring, of what these kind of innovations can bring?
It's a really interesting question, because with technology, like you said, for some people, it's almost like accepted in education to say, "Oh, me and technology, it's not my thing. I'm going to avoid it." But if you're not fantastic at spelling, if you was a teacher and said, "Oh, me and spelling, it's not my thing. I'm not going to spell," you'd be like, "Well, no, because it's part of the curriculum." And it's the same with. But we have this mindset, and then one of the big things in education for the past couple of years is growth mindset, and some teachers will talk about growth mindset with the children, but then won't take something new themselves. And it's interesting. I've done this before. What I've done before is we need to, as teachers, think more like children. So I've had, when I talk about apps, I've had an app, and if I put an app in a classroom with some 6-year-old on a table, let some 5 kids come in, the children will walk over, they'll look at the iPad, they'll look at the app, they'll play with it, they'll mess around, and within 5 minutes they've figured it out. when I've done some CPD with teachers, if I've left an iPad on the table, some teachers will walk in, will sit down and wait for you to explain it to them. And I think we've got to think like children sometimes, just have that inquisitive nature. And we talk with growth mindset, we talk about making mistakes and things will go wrong. It does, and it does in technology. But if you're, as a teacher, afraid to make mistakes yourself, then the kids will you can't expect then the children to be okay to make mistakes in, English, math, science, or whatever it is. So when I make a mistake, which I do, with technology, because sometimes things don't work, we just go, oh gosh, what's happened here? Let's try to figure this out. Oh, the microphone's down. What could we do? Just like we had at the start here, we had a bit of a microphone problem. I would then, with my kids, even if I know what the problem is, I'll say, gosh, what could I look for? One of the kids will pop the hand up, Mr. Hunt, have you clicked the speaker thing at the bottom? And then we can figure out the problem themselves, because if the kids see the teacher make mistakes and be okay with it and figure it out with the class, then you instill that thought process in the children, and then they're okay to make mistakes. Because a lot of children, because of our social media generation, they focus on just the negative side of something, like the whole likes thing. So if someone puts a post online, you see it with adults now, if they had 6,000 positive comments and 2 negative ones, the comments that they'll probably read is the 2 negative ones. And it's the same with the children, if they have this negative view of making mistakes, then it caps them, it stops them taking risks. And I think that's kind of what we've got to take risks. And on the other side of the CPD, I've seen some CPD where they'll have just chuck so much information at teachers that are a bit like reluctant, but they want to learn. And it's like, imagine if I've got 100 tennis balls, if I lob 100 tennis balls at you, you're not going to catch one. And that's like throwing 100 ideas. If you just chuck 1 or 2 or 3, then you'll catch them, and then you'll use that. And then if you have success with a couple of apps or websites or bits of technology, then you're more likely to take up on board more new ideas. And I think that's kind of the way we've got to look at it. And I find as well in the UK, especially, we'll have the thing that breaks my heart is when I've gone into schools, and schools will sometimes buy the technology. They'll go, oh, we've heard the word iPads or Chromebooks. They'll buy a bank of them or lots of them. They'll get them and they'll go, oh, what do we do now? So they've spent all the money on the technology, but not the training. So you wouldn't buy a Ferrari, would you, and then not learn how to drive it? You would learn how to drive before you'd get the Ferrari. Not that I can afford a Ferrari yet, but you would buy the car and then you would learn how to drive it as well. You wouldn't just, because otherwise it's just sat in the drive. And it's the same with some technology. I've seen some iPads and laptops just gathering just because someone's not quite sure how to use them, and that's kind of what the training side is just as important, if not more so, than the tech side itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost, it's interesting to see how almost the way you're talking about training with teachers mirrors in a lot of ways the way you would talk about or one would talk about educating children in the classroom, which is this idea of the building blocks and starting from, starting small and building up, and one idea be leading into another. But of course, it shouldn't be, because adults are just grown-up children. There's my pearl of wisdom for the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Honestly, we never grow up. I mean, I was just, I'll be honest, just before I got on the conversation with you, I was playing my PlayStation downstairs, having a bit of a game of FIFA before it came on. So I'm never going to grow up, and I think that's why I'm a teacher. Because I don't think we ever grow up. My mum is 7. Gosh, you'll hate me saying this online. She's 74. Little story
we'll bleep that out. We'll bleep that out.
70. Yeah. She's older. Yes. She's like she's a home nurse. So what she did 4 years ago, she still works now. She goes and she administers medicine. And she has a paper rota. So she'll get a piece of paper and she'll go to the first person she's going to go to, and she'll go on her drive. And then she had a Nokia at that point, a Nokia 3310. So do you remember the old green screen, like the brick thing? She had one of those.
Yes, great.
Charge it once a year. So she had that, and then her company that she worked for, they were going paperless. So she had a panic. She was like, "Oh, Simon," because she used to send text messages with no space in between. She struggled with technology. "Oh, Simon, what am I going to do? They're sending me emails." So I said, "Right, I'm going to teach her about emails." So she got given a smartphone, a clever phone as she called it, And I sat in the lounge and I set up an email for her. And the way she seemed to understand it is, I said, when you get an email, it's like when a letter gets delivered to your house. It arrives on your doorstep, you open it up, and it's delivered to you. It's the same as an email, but your address is your email address. And she seemed to understand it. And then cut 6 months later, I went home early on a Friday afternoon to meet my dad, because my dad was home early on that Friday. And I was sat in the lounge with my dad having a coffee, watching Top Gear like we do together.
Nice.
My mum was at work, and she drove up, and she parked in the driveway, and she's got like a little red car. It looks like Postman Pat's van, if you know what Postman Pat is. She drove up in the driveway, she got out of the car, stood in the porch, didn't say hello to us or anything, got back in the car, and then drove off. And I said to my dad, why did Mum not even come and say hello? And he said, I don't know, she's supposed to be at work. And then when she eventually came home, I said, Mum, why did you come home? Why didn't you come and say hello? She said, oh, Simon, I had an email. I said, what do you mean you had an email? Now, for 6 months, every time she had an email, because I told her, and she blames me for this, because I told her it's like getting a letter delivered to your house. When it pinged on her phone, she drove home to our home address, to check her phone, because she thought she could only open her emails there.
God.
So she was putting in mega mileage every day. And then when she figured this out, she realised that why she was struggling with her rota in the day, because she was driving to and from home. And then that was 2 years ago. Cut forward, my mum's, she's got a Facebook account, she's got Twitter, she Skypes me all the time, we had Zoom calls, we did Kahoot lessons together, and so if my mum at 70 something, my older mother,
yes.
if she can go from a Nokia 3310 to being a Facebook presence within a couple of years, then as teachers, we can embrace this new technology. And she, in fact, I did a session at the BT Tower in London, and she was part of it, because I talk about her, and she Skyped in to talk about how easy technology is. But at the start, her microphone didn't work, so she was just mouthing, and she was like waving her arms, couldn't figure out. And then when she put it on, I said, Mum, we planned that, didn't we, Mum, to say how easy it is to make mistakes, and that's fine. And she went, oh yes, son, yes, son. And so that was all part of it. But it's great, and she's great fun. But that's why I always talk about my mother in sessions that I do, and I have videos of her talking about technology. So yeah, she has 2 Facebook accounts, but nobody knows why. She says she doesn't, but it's got activity on both, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe she's moonlighting, I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, one for the friends, one for the fans.
That's Hazel. That's why. So I start my sessions. I talk about my mum. I always say #be like Hazel, because my mum's called Hazel. So that's what I talk about in my sessions. And it's So it's she starts trending every so often. Be like Hazel.
It's a good.
She's a legend.
One. I mean, it's one hell of a redemption story to go from the. I feel for her clocking up all that mileage with coming back to get those. To get those emails, it's sort of an understandable mistake to make.
It makes some sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
there is some sort of, you can sort of figure out where she's coming from. But honestly, this happens all the time. I test lessons on my mother. Honestly, we had a conversation about, when you're in a car and when there's a fly in the car, is the fly flying as fast as the car to stay within the car? She tried to. And I said, well, no, Mum, because that means the fly is then flying 70 miles per hour, and we talked about air pressure, and so I can test lessons on my mum. So it works on my mum. I'm fine. It will work on my primary school kids. #be like Hazel.
Maybe she should be the one on this podcast right now. It sounds like
she would take over. She would take over, no problem.
The secret agent. Well, we'll see about having her on next time. But for the time being, we shall continue. No, it's certainly a wonderful wonderful story, wonderful set of anecdotes there. Be like Hazel. We'll definitely keep that.
Let's get it trending worldwide. Be like
Hazel. Absolutely. You've actually touched a little bit on what I was going to ask you next, but I just wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into the question of resources next, because obviously when it comes to innovation and bringing in new strategies, resources are often going to be a big part of that, both online resources and offline. We've already talked about the value of Skype or Zoom or Google Hangouts, whatever it is, and using those in the right way. But I just wanted to, if we could, go a little deeper into the importance of resources to your teaching methods and innovations, and also how important it is to use the right resource for the particular challenge at hand, or strategy that you're trying to implement.
Yeah, so with resources, like I said about when we, lots of schools will have an old projector in the cupboard. I would always start with, the first thing you have to do is check what you've got first and whether you're utilising what you've got first before you look at buying something else in. And also look at your network, your internet. Is it stable? If you're thinking of buying 30 iPads or 30 Chromebooks, will your network let that happen? So always start from the foundations and go up. So check what you have first and figure out whether you can put any CPD in there or training for the staff of the stuff you've got first before you even think about anything else. Once you've done that, I would also then ask the teachers, like use the teachers, ask them what would they like to be easier in the classroom, what would help. Is it online marking? Is it with lockdown, there's lots of innovations that happen with lockdown kind of forced upon us, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, but what do the teachers need first, and also what do the children need? So my school, so our school is an inclusive school for children with physical disabilities. So what that means is we've got a few children per class that are in wheelchairs or physically can't move around the classroom as much. So when we looked at what technology would help our children, we looked at the screens, but then we looked at how, well, when we get children interacting with the whiteboards, we get the children up and touching the screens and then clicking things. But because of the size of our classrooms and the layout, we can't get our children in wheelchairs or physical disabilities up to the screens. So what could we do? So the route we went down is iPads per teacher. So we then mirrored that iPad. So whatever was on our iPad screen was on the main screen. It's casted. So when children are sharing, I take the iPad to the children. So that way, all the children are now included within the lesson. So because a child has physical disability, they're then able to access the lesson because I can bring it to them. And also we're having the iPad in the classroom, and we're able to do other things, like we're able to take pictures and to record things, because sometimes learning in classrooms is not always written down. It's drama, it's PE, it's anything, and we were able to record things, and there's so much stuff out there. It's you kind of almost you need to work out what you've got first, utilize that before you decide what you need next. So like one foot after the other, if that makes sense. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I guess just one follow on that came up for me there is that, is there, how much of an importance is there in, I guess, pairing, you've talked about pairing the right resource with what's going on in the classroom and the specific demands of the students within the classroom. Is there also an importance, because obviously here at Atomy we're an online resource, but is there, so it kind of following on from that, I'm wondering the importance of pairing the right, I guess, offline resource, which would be the interactive, let's say an interactive whiteboard, whatever, or the iPad, with the right online resource that you can use. Is something as well where it's about finding the right compatibility?
It's you don't have to go too far one way. If you just go full online, if your network went down, you kind of need a balance. You need online and offline resources, so you need a balance of both, because we've had network problems before, and if your whole lesson, if you have nothing to fall back on, you're kind of stuck. So as much as we cast our device, if the network went down, that doesn't work. But then we still have software within the screens that we use to be able to still continue and write on the lesson. So I'd say you definitely need a balance of both. Yes, definitely a balance of both. It's just a balance, just like with anything. It's a balance of both.
Yeah, exactly. Finding the right balance between the two. The last area that I wanted to cover with you is, I think you touched on it earlier, and it's kind of, given the current state of affairs, I feel like every conversation naturally leads to here at some point, which is how COVID has affected the world, and it's affected the world in nearly every walk of life, but education is no different. Specifically within the context of primary schools, the primary classroom, your area of expertise, I just wanted to see if you could talk to us a little first of all about how it has affected the classroom, how things have changed with regards to, we're several months in now, but moving a lot of the learning to online learning, and now as we're almost, I guess, coming back in, finding that new balance. How teachers, how yourself and others have responded to this change, and I guess any, obviously it's still essentially early doors, but any innovations that can be brought about in response to these challenges. And then I guess the final part is to get your crystal ball out and talk to how maybe you think primary classrooms are going to look in the future. I know that there's a lot to cover there, but I guess how it has affected where we are now and where we might end up would be the...
Yeah, so going back to what we spoke about before is teachers taking risks, having that block of me and technology. We were locked down in mid-March, and it happened for us very quickly. Like, it was, the government was announcing things before we knew. People presumed, like parents of children presumed, that we knew something was going to happen before it didn't. We didn't. We found out then the same time as everyone else. So when lockdown happened, it happened very quickly. So those things like, who heard of Zoom before? Before lockdown, some teachers never even heard of Zoom. If you had shares in Zoom, Netflix, and toilet roll at the start of lockdown, you would have done very well for yourself.
And masks,
and masks as well.
Those are the four.
And hand gel. That was like gold dust.
Those are the industries that have thrived.
It was, yeah. But because what happened is those teachers that were like, I'm not sure about trying this online learning stuff, were almost forced to do it. The interesting thing is, because they were forced to do it, but not forced to do it by themselves. So it wasn't like I was a teacher that was reluctant to use this technology, was like, I've got to do this by myself. Hundreds and thousands of teachers all along the country were going, right, what does this do, and how do we use Zoom? Have I even got a web camera? How does my microphone work? And everyone was in the same boat. And then it was really interesting, like the first few staff meetings, when we had meetings with teachers at first to figure out what to do. The amount of like kids you would have walking in, of teachers kind of looking down the camera, and then for a few weeks later, those teachers that couldn't figure out how to use the microphone were then putting their nice virtual backgrounds behind themselves, and they were almost forced to use this technology. And I think that is a good thing, as much as there's been lots of negative things around COVID, like way more, but there are some positive things. So teachers, I think, have banded together and kind of, let's help each other out with things. And also, now we're back at school. Last night we had a meeting about Seesaw, so we're getting ourselves ready to, just in case, because we're having bubbles around the country, kind of locking down again and having to isolate. So we're now getting things ready that if this happens again, which I think it might do, we're in a better position now, and teachers are able to send work out, do verbal feedback, record videos, and annotate. And those teachers that before lockdown would have never dreamed of being able to do this were sat in the staff room, and this was last night actually, a Wednesday evening staff meeting. They were sat in the staff room, and they were learning, and they were thinking, I can do this because I was able to use Zoom, I was able to use these online resources that I wasn't able to use before, and they were going for it. And I think that's a real positive thing, and I think that's going to have a direct impact upon things in the future. So there's way more things online now. We're looking into at the moment, we have reading journals, so where children would bring their reading diary into school. You'd sign the reading diary to get as a teacher, you'd sign the diary. But because of we might go to lockdown, or because sometimes children lose their reading diaries, we're now looking at going online. So it's saving paper. It's actually saving us money as well, and it means that parents are able to log on, write in the homework diary, and we won't lose that. And these are the innovations that are now happening within schools up and down the country. It's not just my school. I've seen this happen all over the place, and I've done some CPD sessions, which I would usually go into schools and stand in front and talk to teachers and say, this resource worked really well. I've now had, I've done that virtually now, and that's kind of the new teacher training is virtual, and it's also more convenient as well for some teachers, because if you switch your camera, you can sit back, have your coffee, relax, you can watch it in the comfort of your own home, or you can switch your camera and be engaged, and you can still use the technology that you have. You can still click on a website straight away. So it's changing, and I think it's changing for the better. And it also means that you can now, I can do a CPD session at the other side of the world that maybe I wouldn't have done before. Whereas before I'd have to get a flight, go over, and it saves money as well. And it's things like just travel. It saves on travel. It all adds to it. I mean, in Manchester where we are, when we had the lockdown, the air just seemed cleaner, and because cars weren't driving as much, and we can reduce our carbon footprint in a way of not travelling to places. I think that's just as a benefit for everything, including things like paper, even things like something simple like a weekly newsletter that went out to parents. That we print out 500 copies of paper every single Friday. That's now done virtually. So that's 500 pieces of paper per week, every week, that's saved, that always end up in the bin sometimes. So I think it has a positive effect, and I think it'll continue to just to naturally go that way. If that makes sense. Is that? Gosh, I kind of gone on there. Do you know when you start answering something, do you think, have I answered a question that was posed to me?
You absolutely have, and almost went beyond the remit, but with regards to like cars and all the rest. But it's all relevant, and it all kind of feeds into, I guess, the theme of what you're saying, which is that, when all of this started way back in, well, for our part of the world in March, there would have, I felt, probably you had the same feeling, being just a great deal of doom and gloom with regards to how this was going to affect everything. And let's not sugarcoat it. It's being a terrible thing in many ways, the pandemic, how it's affected communities in so many ways. But that isn't to say that there haven't been some positives in the way people have responded. And one of those, definitely what I'm hearing, seems to be that teachers have risen to the occasion, and when push has come to shove and it's been forced to adopt these new online methods and accept these new technologies, it sounds like that has by and large been a positive process and continues to, and in the long run, might it be fair to say, might be something that in years to come, while it is the worst kind of catalyst that we could have hoped for, it could be the case we look back on everything that has happened in the last few months, and maybe in the next few months, as a catalyst for permanent and positive changes in the way we teach. Would that be fair to say?
Definitely, because just thinking about to the lockdown when that happened. So one of the hardest things for everyone was just being at home by yourself, not having that daily communication with people. And because of the technology, we I said to my kids, I told my kid this previous, that we'd have weekly Zoom sessions, we'd have Kahoot questions, and I'd see all their little faces smiling, waving at me, and it helped me get through a hard time for me as well, because I was used to seeing them every single day. I was quite isolated. We was with our family, which was in a nicety was with our family, and we were all safe and happy, which was good. But I didn't get to see the kids that I just built that relationship with from September, because it was like cut off very quickly. And also when we had these sessions, the children were waving to each other and smiling, and they were able to, because that happened because of technology. And then after a few weeks with the staff meetings, we used to have staff meetings on Wednesdays like we did last night. And what we did is, after each staff meeting, we'd have a pub quiz, like as a just a fun thing together, and we'd all be giggling and changing the children never saw this, thank God, but we were changing the boards, asking questions, and it kept us as a staff, even though we didn't see each other every day together. And if anything, because of we set up WhatsApp groups and stuff, I found we spoke to each other more during the lockdown than we did when we were in school, because sometimes we're quite isolated in our classrooms. We get on with, go home, and we're talking to each other, and relationships have really developed since lockdown. And now we're back in school, I feel like I know the staff that I don't speak to because of the side of the school. I saw more over the lockdown. I was able to have that relationship, and it's just really benefited us in that way.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. I guess every cloud does have a silver lining, and positives being taken out of even the toughest of situations. That is going to be all we have time for on our central topic for the day. However, Simon, you are not quite off the hook yet.
Okay. Sounds ominous.
Yes. Well, it is. No, it's not. As regular listeners will know, we always like to get our guests to finish with a bit of a hot tip for the teacher listeners. It could be a little fun piece of advice. It could be a little anecdote that you've picked up from your teaching days. Can be funny, can be serious. Totally up to you. But basically, what have you got for us in terms of a little hot tip for the day?
Right. I think two. I'm going to go one very short one very slightly longer one. The short one's just a funny little thing that happened last week. So the longer one is kind of going back to what we said previous, which is that we never grow up. So just before Christmas, it was in September, October time, we were talking about what you'd like to be when you get older. You know, we just had that conversation. You know, someone would like to be this, someone would like to be this, and then one of my children, Chloe, popped around and said, "Mr. Hunt, what do you want to be when you're older?" And I thought, so I had a little think, what do you mean, what do you want to be? She says, yeah, well, and what do you want to be when you're older? And I thought, well, as a child, when I was in year 6, I had no concept whether a teacher was 21, 31, 41, 51. I have no concept. And the children see me as a big kid anyway, so I understand what you mean there. So I said, I'd like to be an author. You know, I'd love to write a book or be an author one day. And she said, Mr. Hunt. And I thought, oh gosh, something's coming here. It's going to get me. And she said, you're always telling us we can be authors and whatever we want. Then why don't you do it? And I thought, right, okay. So I thought, I got to practice what I preach here. So I got home and I thought, right, I'd love to write a children's book. I've had ideas previous and I thought, right, I want to maybe write something. So I sat down and I started to write something about... I always tell my kids, write about something you're passionate or interested in, and then you can start. And always start with that first word. So I've got 2 children. Hugo, he's now 6, and Delilah, she's 3. At bedtime, I read stories with the children, and with Delilah, she loves things that are a bit disgusting and things that are a bit silly. And with Hugo, there's loads of the boy and the dinosaur and the trumping. There's all these kinds of things. But with Delilah, there's a lot of books of princess, unicorn, pink stuff, and she's not a princess, unicorn, pink stuff type of girl. She's a jumping in puddles, diving on you, wrestling you type of girl. So I thought, right, well, I'll write a book for her. So I decided to write a book about something she does all the time, which is a bit disgusting, but she picks her nose all the time. And I call her my bogey princess, or I think some people say booger princess. So I call her my Delilah Rose the bogey princess. So I've written most of the book that very night that I got home. It was a rhyming book. And then I thought, right, I got in contact with an illustrator who brought the book to life, that made it look like Delilah. And then jump forward to March, it was then published, and then it was on the BBC as on World Book Day as one of the books, a new book that the children are looking at and that children are enjoying, and I was there explaining about the book. And this is all because one child in my class, Chloe, challenged me the way I challenge them all the time. And that, you know, I think that's what happens in the classroom. It's full of surprises. And then this brings me to the last one. Last week we were looking at underwater. We came in school last week. We're looking at our topics, the deep blue, so underwater animals. And one of the children was talking about a octopus. So what do we know about an octopus? And one of the children, I teach year 4, so they are 7 and 8 years old. Popped his hand up and said, yes, Mr. Hunt, they have 8 testicles. And I said, pardon? And he says, yes, Mr. Hunt, they have 8 testicles. And none of the kids heard, like, they didn't realise what she said. Yeah. But my TA was sat in the corner giggling and laughing. And I was like, oh, no, it's not 8 testicles, it's 8 tentacles. Because the last thing I want is, how was your first day at school? Mr. Hunt told us that an octopus has 8 testicles. So I did look it up, they don't. But they have 8 tentacles. So, well, I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, I can't believe you.
We did find out lots of other information, but yeah, we don't, don't tell him 8 testicles anyway. So, but that's the thing. That's the joy of being in school. I could teach the same lesson every day for 100 years, and it would never be the same. And that keeps you on your toes as a teacher. And that's what I think that's interesting. Sometimes that's the hard thing about our job, but I also think that's the best thing about our job is that the children keep us on our toes. We never stop growing. Like my mum has not stopped growing now. She's now got she's looking at getting a new laptop. So that's a whole other lesson I've got to sort out for her. You never stop growing. You just never stop evolving as a teacher and as a person as well. And children taught me that, and I think that's what I love about our job, being a teacher. It's the best job in the world, I think.
Yeah, well, nothing illustrates that better than 2 side-to-side anecdotes from a classroom. One which led to what sounds like a delightful read.
Oh, it is. It's lovely.
A children's book. And another which led to a possibly not true but very exciting new fact about octopuses and their testicles.
There you go. I didn't know you'd be saying that.
I did not. In much the same way, every day in the classroom is different. Every day in the podcast is certainly different. And this one has been a very enjoyable one. Thank you so much.
And
Simon,
thank you for having me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. And by extension, I'm going to ask you to say thank you to Hazel as well for providing us with some wonderful anecdotes. # be like Hazel. We'll try and get that trending again. That is all that we have time for. Thanks everybody for listening. If you want to check out any other episodes, you can find them on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you want to check us out on our main site, you can find us at getatomy.com. For the time being, it's going to be goodbye from Simon.
Thank you. Goodbye from me, guys. Thank you.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.